Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is an interview with Mr. Colin McAndrew for the Griffith University Jubilee History at Griffith University on the 15th of February 1996 with Dr. Milford.
Want to elaborate on
Yes,
it?
sure.
I'm happy to run with
what you want.
thanks.
Yeah. So, Colin, if you could give me a brief biographical background to start with, how you became involved with Griffith.
Okay. Well, I've been here 4 years, just over 4 years now. So I'm a new boy on the block to some extent. I started in January '92, and my position of Pro Vice Chancellor Administration was created at that time. It was created during 1991.
Yeah.
So I'm the first incumbent of the position. And prior to that, I was at Flinders University as academic registrar. Before that, at UNE, I was deputy registrar. I worked at Melbourne University for 6 years in a couple of positions, and Monash University before that. I originally started life as an academic at Monash, and then moved over to administration. The position here was the PVCA, as it's abbreviated to, was created during 1991 when the Vice Chancellor restructured the central administration. Previously there had been 3 administrative divisions, if you don't count Brian Cook's area of information services. Apart from that, there were 3 administrative divisions. There was the registrar's area, the business manager's area, and the facilities management area. And the VC essentially amalgamated those 3 into a single administration, a unitary administration. It's not really for me to say what the reasons were. I think you can talk to him about that, but a unitary administration is not uncommon these days in universities. It has the advantage, I think, from the chief executive's point of view, of a single backside to kick. A single person as head of administration, and Vice Chancellor doesn't have to worry about coordination and so on. The way it was created, that is, the way university administration was created, was quite interesting, because he brought the 3 administrative divisions together, but what came out the other end were 9 offices, reporting, each of them headed up by a director, and each reporting into the PVCA. Now, I think he was influenced in this by David Limerick, Professor David Limerick, who was until recently head of the Graduate School of Management, and does a lot of consulting work with companies on organisational structure and so on. And David and the Vice Chancellor himself had seen the flatter structures that were emerging in industry, and so what came out of the discussions was a fairly flat structure of 9 offices, and a fairly broad span of control. The other aspect of it that was driving the leading up to 9 offices was the VC's desire to give certain areas of administration a higher profile than within the organisation, and a higher status, if you like, than they previously had. And those were the Office of HRM, Human Resource Management, which had previously just been a staff office buried within the business manager's area. The Office for Research, which had just been a subset of the registrar's area. University Relations, as it was called then, now called External Relations, a PR operation, which had been virtually a person and a half attached to the VC's office. And in each of those cases, and the International Centre, that was the other one, that was sort of boosted and given prominence. And in each of those cases, it wasn't just a question of taking them as they were, but it was also a case of broadening, in each case, their role. So the office of HRM was a true human resource management office. It wasn't just a processing outfit. It dealt with workplace health and safety, equal employment opportunity, staff development, the full range of HRM. And university relations wasn't just a PR outfit. It encompassed alumni, it encompassed protocol, and encompassed development, in terms of going out and getting money, sort of type. So and it's the same applied to the International Centre and Research. He wanted them to be fully rounded operations in the way that has been developing in other places.
Okay.
So that's how university administration came about. How I arrived on the scene.
Right. So since then, since you've been here, how has it been working out? The highs and the lows.
Yeah. Well, it certainly hasn't been static. I mean, I think that's the most obvious, in terms of the structure, I think that's the most obvious point, because the 9 offices are now 6.
Yes, yes.
One office was essentially, when a senior member left, was essentially amalgamated into another office, and it was amalgamated into the academic registrar's area. And 2 of the other offices have been transferred from me to Brian Cook. The first one was the International Centre, and the second was what is now external relations, university relations. I actually proposed the move of the International Centre a couple of years ago, because the director left, and I thought that the university would actually get more benefit out of Brian being responsible for that area, because he had a stronger background in international work than I did, and he was interested in it. And then when the university relations deputy directorship came vacant last year, we started talking about creating a single office of external relations that would straddle both international and domestic PR.
Right.
And that's how the Office of External Relations was created. And since I didn't want the international stuff back, the movement was across to Brian. There have been some other less significant changes. Responsibility for the university's telephone systems, for example, used to be with me in facilities management. I initiated its transfer to Brian's area because of the convergence of telephone and computer technology. It just didn't make sense for them to be organisationally separate. There's been some traffic in the other direction. Things like copyright and archives come across from Brian's area of responsibility into mine.
You're the one that's responsible for archives. I'm trying to try to it.
Theoretically, I try not to publicise this. I'm the one to blame, I'm afraid. There have been quite a lot of structural changes and really adjustments to either as a result of changed circumstances or changed personnel. And I've got a very strong view that your administrative structure is a support structure. I mean, it's second order structure in the scheme of things compared with the academic work of the university. We always need to keep our perspective as to our importance. But I've also had the view that your administrative structure, there is no perfect administrative structure for a university. You'll find a particular structure working well in one university and the same structure working badly in another university. And when you get down to tin tacks, more often than not, it's the people, the personalities that's the issue there. I think our administrative structures need to always take account of, as well as the needs of the academic areas, the actual people we've got, and you put things where the strengths are and what's build on those.
Yeah.
So we keep those sorts of things continually under review. one of my main jobs has been, well, I suppose my job sort of looks two ways. It looks into the offices who report to me, and I've got a coordinating role there in making sure that they see themselves as a team, and that the somewhat artificial boundaries between the offices don't get in the way of actually delivering services, and creating that sort of ethos amongst my senior staff that see themselves as part of university administration and not little chimneys of offices that don't cooperate with each other. And I've spent a fair amount of time working on that with the directors. And the other direction I face, of course, is into the Vice-Chancellor's office, where I'm, if you like, a sort of senior advisor to the VC on a range of things, like anyone in my position, whether it's called PVC or registrar or whatever. You become a sort of advice to the Vice-Chancellor on anything, but particularly where the problems are tricky ones, you get thrown at you, or you're used as a sounding board, or
You get the hard work.
you get the hard ones. Yeah. So those are the two sort of focal points for my work.
Yeah, that's fine. So I think we pretty well covered that fairly well. I don't know that we need to go into, unless you do, or unless anything occurs to you, we've fairly well covered the administrations and that sort of thing since we started. Well, how do you see as the Griffith overall philosophy and culture at the moment, and how does that impact on you?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I've worked in several universities, so I've got a bit of basis for comparison.
Yeah.
I think there's I think Griffith is travelling pretty well as a university, and certainly by comparison with some other places that one can think of. I think it's developing a good academic profile. Its performance in the various sort of arenas that we have to perform in these things, like quality or research, is improving all the time.
Yeah, I've got the 1995 quality.
Yeah.
Good.
Our performance in research is improving as well, and on a number of indicators. We're not in the sort of old and bold league, but we are steady improvers.
Yeah.
We're doing a lot of interesting things in some of our courses. One of the bedrocks of Griffith, of course, is interdisciplinarity, which marks us out from most other universities, and we don't have the traditional departmental structure. There are some others, like Murdoch, that are of the same ilk, but we're in a minority.
Yeah.
But that seems to work pretty well. We're of course a much amalgamated university. We went through 4 amalgamations. I think we're second only to Deakin University in the number of amalgamations we went through during the Dawkins era.
Yeah, I've gone through all the files on the amalgamation, sensitive and insensitive.
Yeah. I mean, amalgamations are never easy, but again, in comparison with some other places, I think we've had a fairly smooth passage with amalgamations. There's always tensions of some sort here and there, and amalgamations take years to bed down. You really are. If they're going to last, you're probably looking at 10-year time frame for them. And I think it would be fair to say that of our 4 amalgamations, the Mount Gravatt and the QCA ones have bedded down more quickly than the QCM and the Gold Coast, and that's for different reasons. The QCM had a long history of autonomy, and the Gold Coast is is set in an area where there's a lot of rivalry between the Gold Coast generally and Brisbane. And there's a larger context of rivalry that our particular amalgamation sits within. But given the potential for difficulties and given the difficulties that have arisen in some other places, we've actually had a pretty smooth run, I think, and that's a tribute to the Vice Chancellor principally. I mean, I came after the amalgamations had been negotiated or had taken place, so that my role has been in helping to bed them down, but I didn't actually negotiate them. And I think he did well in the negotiations that took place at the time.
No, that's fine. Is there a special niche, do you think, in the tertiary sector for Griffith that makes it, gives it its own individuality? I suppose interdisciplinarity you've mentioned, but are there any other things that you would name as giving it a special...
Well, I think there are a couple of things. There's particular academic emphasis, and the ones that automatically spring to mind are Asian studies and environmental studies. I think Griffith is recognised for those two, which go back to its origins. And certainly when I worked interstate, those were the two academic areas of Griffith that I was aware of, that sort of got through my consciousness. And I think when you talk to people in the business community or wherever, those two tend to come up. I think that there are others that will develop over time in terms of academic emphasis. The tourism hotel management area, I think, is probably one. I think our profile in health will rise because we're doing a lot of interesting things there. So there's the niche created by academic emphasis, and there's the niche created by our geographic location as a multi-campus university in this real hotspot of population growth in the Brisbane Gold Coast corridor. And I think we can and we need to capitalise on that in as many ways as possible, both in terms of just the sheer population growth, but also things like TechQuad, which is the collaboration of the four universities, the three Brisbane universities plus Bond, trying to create something like the Research Triangle of North Carolina, which was the model for it, being part of that sort of high-tech development in what is has all the potential to be a booming area, and at the same time the connections with Asia from this part of Queensland.
Would you say that particular aspiration is at what stage is that? Does it look as if it's going to be a successful venture or end?
You mean TechQuad? Well, it's a bit difficult to know actually. It's been on the go for a few years now and hasn't kicked along. I think as much as people originally hoped it would.
Did that stem by any chance out of that multifunction hollow sort of thing? Was there anything to do with that?
No, not as far as I know. It precedes my time here, but I don't think it was. I think it was the model was the North Carolina Research Triangle. Yeah. And of course Silicon Valley before that. Sure. I think it has some runs on the board, but they're fairly minor runs compared with what the vision is for TechQuad. I think that if the universities can hang in there for just a little longer, I think it will start to show the benefits in terms of attracting high-tech industries, it will need more state government support than it's had up till now. I think current state government probably wouldn't want to hear this, but I think that they could have capitalised more themselves.
When you say current, you mean the ones that were or the ones that are coming?
The Goss government.
Goss government.
Yeah. I mean, I think the Goss government could have capitalised more on the infrastructure provided by the universities and used it as leverage to attract industry. But maybe a different government will give it a bit of a kick along.
That sounds fun. Just something occurred to me as you were talking there about that. Logan campus, the change of government struck me. Logan is likely to tap a market there and accentuate the whole Griffith Gold Coast corridor concept and perception. Would that be a fair comment, first of all?
Yeah, well, that was, I mean, that's part of the whole plan there. At the moment, you've got the corridor running north-south, and you've got a cluster of campuses at the northern end and one at the southern end, or just partway at the southern end, and sort of 60 or 70 kilometres in between and nothing. Logan sits, of course, in there, partway down it, and so you start to see campus university straddling the corridor.
Is there likely to be any negative? I don't know that this needs to be even answered, let alone explained or elaborated upon. But is there likely to be any hitches with that because of the new government and because of the Gold Coast, stated to me anyway by Peter Hobart, not so much Michael Earthing, preference to be more independent of Griffith and not being very supportive of Logan because it is their pastures, etc. And to the degree that you want to address that, because I don't know that it's necessary for the history, how do you see that?
Well, I think there's a potential problem there. We don't know what the state government, the incoming state government's view will be. There was, I think it's true to say, there was some resentment at the Gold Coast about the creation of the Logan campus. The view was expressed that it was too early to develop a campus at Logan, that the Gold Coast campus should be built up to a greater degree first before another campus was thought of. It's possible there'll be lobbying of the incoming state government to can or defer Logan. I think that'll create a political stoush because a number of the seats around the Logan area are now coalition seats as a result of the July election. And I think a number of people around that area are starting to get used to the idea of having their own campus, and the demographics that were analysed in a sense in justification of the Logan campus showed that the population at that northern end is actually larger than at the southern end, is growing faster, and is in a younger age group. So it was those sorts of analysis, and it wasn't done by us, it was done by the Office of Higher Education, those sorts of analysis that justified creation of the campus. Anything's possible in politics.
Given the very early ethos of Griffith, that it was to provide a sort of community base and education, fairly liberal, but nevertheless a very clear community-based education, and there was a socio-economic component on it to give that opportunity. Does Logan maybe to some degree fulfill, in that sense, the aim to provide a broad education to a broadly based community?
Well, it's certainly true. Again, that was another factor in the creation of the Logan
because
campus.
socio-economic grouping was a factor.
Yeah.
Good. I'll move on to that because, as I say, that's a little bit too immediate. Wait and see what happens to see what actions you can use in history, sort of thing. I think you've probably answered the next question of how successful were the amalgamations. Did they pose any administrative problems to you in trying to bed them down, and that you haven't already referred to?
Well, there were certainly administrative challenges and problems in the sense of how best to deliver central administrative services across a variety of campuses. It's much easier in one sense if you've got a single campus and you're delivering your finance or your HRM or your office for research or your student administration all on the one campus. Where you're operating on a multi-campus basis and you're responsible for central administration, you've got to make judgments about which functions you can handle off the original campus, Nathan, such as payroll. I mean, that's an easy one. You're not going to run that off more than one campus. And at the other end of the spectrum, what services must you deliver on the spot? Student counselling, for example. You can expect students to come, or the one to come to Nathan to get the student counselling. You've got to have counsellors on the spot there. So there had to be a functional analysis done and work out where things were best located. And that's an ongoing process. We're still working through that, still reviewing it constantly. The Limerick Task Force last year, 94-95, was about the balance between central administration and devolved administrations in the faculties, whether faculties were at Nathan or on one of the other campuses. And that's something that's kept under review all the time, because it's linked with the question of what's the most efficient and effective way of getting things done. It cuts in at two levels. There's what's the most efficient and effective way of getting things done within university administration, within central administration, but also within the university as a whole. What's the most efficient and effective way? Is it for UA to do it, or is it for the faculties to do it? Because they've got their own administration, so they've got quite large administrative cohorts, which are not part of my bailiwick. They report to a faculty manager who reports to the dean. So the balance between central administration and the faculty administration is another aspect of this that we just keep looking at and constantly looking for the best ways of disposing the resources.
That's the first time I've looked at that. Traditionally, the faculties of all our schools originally have all obviously then had their own administrative structure that's not responsible to the central administration. Does that work well? Is there not a case for administration to be more centralised, at least on the one campus? I mean, I know the deans have a hell of a lot of... I mean, it obviously gives them a lot of power, but I'm not sure that they're the best people to administer it. I mean, as an academic, I'd probably be shocked to say that, but the
setup here is not unique. Other universities have got devolved faculty administrations where the faculty administrations report to the dean rather than to the centre, although some also have a situation where the administrative staff in the faculties are on the registrar's staff and are sort of outposted. I think that for some, again, I think it comes down to functional analysis. In some areas, I think it does work, and in some it doesn't. The area that it particularly doesn't work in, and I think we're starting to recognise this, is the PR area. We've had a situation where, with the one-line budgets going out to the faculty, they've been able to create whatever positions, administrative positions they wanted to and some of them have been creating public relations type positions, but because they can't afford high level expertise, they're appointing at fairly low levels. They can't get talent. And so we've got, and this is a reflection on the individuals themselves, but it means that we've got a relatively small central PR office, and resources spread extremely thinly around the faculties, and we suffer from that because, by comparison to the CEC, which has got a much more focused corporate approach to the PR side of things, and we're in the process of really overhauling that now.
Fair enough. Leading out any further, that's fine on the administrative stuff and the separate identity of faculties. The PR area you mentioned, what is Griffith's image?
Well, not an easy question to answer.
I know that's a hard one, because when I ask that, normally people like John McLaughlin or something, when I talk to them, they just ask the question back again.
Yeah.
But it is an area where, would you say, I mean, in a general sense, that it is an area that needs some focus?
Yeah, it is. There's no doubt. Griffith, in some respects, is in the same boat as places like Flinders, where I worked last, or Macquarie, or Murdoch. And they're the second or third or La Trobe University, the second or third university that came on stream. And so they're at disadvantage compared with the old and bold. And they have to establish their own identity, and it's a struggle there to do that. I think that in Griffith's case, it's that difficult case, as I read the past, has been compounded by a view that Griffith was a radical, a left-wing radical university full of greenies and sort of strong left-wing types, and doing some peculiar things with its courses, because it didn't have departments and so on, and was all on about Asian studies and what we were doing 20 years ago, talking about Asian studies. And I think there's I'm not sure just how strong the residual of those perceptions are out in the community, but I'm sure it's there. I hope it's diminishing. I don't think it's as strong as it was, say, 10 years ago or so. And again, the passage of time helps. I think the current Vice-Chancellor has got a lot to do with that, because he's changed the academic profile of the university quite dramatically. When he came here, there was only 600 graduate courses on offer. We've now got, I don't know, over 100. There was no professional, what is usually called professional courses. He pushed and shoved and got the university into the professional areas of accounting and law. We've got psychology, various others, sort of engineering, that sort of didn't make Griffith look like a normal university when we used those. It sort of broadened the profile, got things in there that people could relate to more easily perhaps than previously. And he's also got out and about around town at functions in industry and government people to promote the university. But there's still, I'm still sure there's a residual from the origins of the university. The image of Griffith, it depends on where you're talking about. The image interstate or overseas is not necessarily anything like the image within Brisbane. And when I was interstate, I had no working interstate, I had no particular special interest in connection with Griffith, but I had a very favourable impression of it in terms of its work in interdisciplinarity, and that sort of image in my mind of the university being so interesting, innovative things, and with particular strength in research strength in Asia and the environment. And I think you would find a very positive image of Griffith interstate.
Obviously, I'm talking to a lot of people around it. That radical image, that's, I think, hopefully again is dissipating, but it remains not just in the community. There are residues of that within the university too. Has that created problems for you at all?
No, and it's been, I haven't found Griffith to be a radical.
No, I don't think it is, but there's certainly some residue of I get the impression, and it was not getting the impression, I am told by a small, probably residual romantic pink with sunglasses crowd that it's not the university we intended, and it hasn't developed. It's been traditionalized and brought into the traditional method of operating. With what you've said is very valuable in creating an impression from interstate, but that hasn't so far created any problems for you, or has it?
No, I haven't at all. No, I haven't encountered that sort of. I know there are some individuals who say that the original Griffith mission hasn't been fulfilled in the way that the university has developed, but I've never come across it as a strong message in any of the forums.
So the reason I'm not labouring that for the sake of it being an area of contention, but to pick on the fact that somebody who's now very involved at the university at a very senior level, and it hasn't created, it's not an issue for you. So coming in from 4 years ago, that's important, I think. Yeah.
The critical thing, I guess, about Griffith was the rapidity with which it exploded in size because of the amalgamation.
Yeah.
It was a small single campus university in 1988, less than 5,000 students. And by 1992, there were about 3 times that size in terms of student numbers, multi-campus. And it was a combination of the amalgamations and the growth that was being pumped into the system generally, which meant that you had a huge influx of staff and students, but particularly staff, who had no allegiance to the original Griffith ethos, if you like.
Yeah.
They hadn't been brought up in the mould, so to speak, and not to say they weren't sympathetic to some aspects of it, but they weren't inculcated with it by any means.
Yeah, they weren't sort of focused purely on that.
Yeah.
Many were. It's important because one of the issues, what you say is important now, because one of the issues obviously I've got to do is show what's changed, what is a modification of the original, and how much of it is totally different, and who initiated or what initiated those changes, whether it be Dawkins amalgamations, funding issues, demographic issues, geographical issues, or all of the above. That sort of thing.
I'm interested to see what you make of it. I suspect it's a mixture of quite a number of factors intersecting in a very short time span.
Yes, and the coincidence of timing with them all too has probably got an element. I think the one that, and I'm you're not the only one that's mentioned it, but I'm pleased that it's growing into something that I can use, is the fact of the employment, the growth of new staff who had no allegiance to the original ethos, and that's just one of the things, but it is an important one. I don't think there's an enormous Well, what challenges do you see? What are the main challenges for yourself in the future? Or for the university generally?
Yeah. Well, I think obviously bedding down the amalgamations and hopefully avoiding hello?
Hello, Vice Chancellor.
So one aspect of that law man is consolidating the amalgamations obviously is an important challenge for us. I think that the whole environment for universities is becoming increasingly competitive right across the board. I was actually talking to a group this morning about this, and I was using it as an example from my time at Flinders, when within the space of 12 months, 6 professors from the medical faculty were poached by other universities, and they had full chairs at Flinders. They headed up medical departments at the Flinders Medical Centre, and yet I think it was UQ, Melbourne and Sydney universities were able to pirate them away by offering them, wasn't even salaries, it was better research facilities and so on. And not only took the professors, they took their postdocs, they took their some of their postgraduate students. We had an example of it here last year with one of our very successful professors, successful in terms of filling in research grants, was targeted by quite deliberately by another university and made an offer he couldn't refuse. So, yeah, the competition is across students, across staff, across PR, the works, and making sure that everything we do keeps us in the hunt for wherever, while at the same time being true to what the core is of the university. The challenge, we don't sort of sell our soul, but at the same time we don't allow ourselves to become a backwater. Managing that competition is a big issue for us, as for all universities. And a sort of aspect of that, but a major one, is the internationalisation issue. Just extending our boundaries beyond the confines of South East Queensland in a whole variety of ways, whether it's through twinning arrangements or even opening a campus of Griffith elsewhere, or some other universities, Asia, for example, and some other universities. Because the competition isn't just with QUT and UQ, it's with the way technology is going. It's going to be global. And we already have Heriot Watt University from Edinburgh regularly advertising some of its master's programs in the press here. Places like Macquarie University offer their MBAs locally by having sessions in town for students. And with the internet developing, people being able to tap into courses at Harvard or Yale or MIT or Oxford or Cambridge down the track, and how the physical universities in this area compete with that. There's a whole lot of interesting things coming down the track at us.
These are definitely the challenges for the future, that's for sure. Yeah. Is there anything that we haven't mentioned so far that you feel you should have some input into, that you'd like to mention in any?
I can't think of anything. I think the way you've approached it pretty well covers the ground.
I mean, obviously it's fairly broad and fairly overview. It may be going to get down to writing, or we may need to put a bit more flesh on some or other issues of it, but there's not really going to be a space for an awful lot of that. But if I do, you don't mind if I give you a ring or call you?
Well,
be okay. the only one other thing I've really got, although there's a million things you could think of. If you were writing a history, what would you say must be included? The one issue that you'd say, that's got to be in, because this is going to be an exercise in what heap of things going to one side of.
Well, I think the success of Griffith as a multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary university, because I think it is proving that the interdisciplinary approach works in a number of ways in terms of what it offers students, undergraduate students, the kind of research that can come out of it, and the type of graduate that it can produce that employers value. It was, I think, regarded as a bit of radical experiment in a sense, back in the early 1970s. I think it stood the test of time, and it hasn't. It's adapted along the way, coping with the changes, including amalgamation. But I think it has, very significantly remained true to interdisciplinarity across a wide range of the university. I mean, that's not total, of course, but you wouldn't expect that with outfits like conservatorium being part of it. But it is still true, and I think it's an experiment that has succeeded. Indeed, it was regarded as an experiment. I can't speak for the originator.
Yes, it definitely was. I mean, it wasn't brand new. It wasn't the only one had tried, but yes.
I mean, there's obviously predecessors in the UK, for example, but it has been successful.
Oh, well, I'm sorry, I said that was the last thing, but I'll come back to one thing that probably you led into there for me. One of the major aims of the university was to be different and offer an alternative to the University of Queensland. Now, the word alternative no longer really describes what it's meant because there's too many connotations, including a radical one. And given that there's still not quite an image, there's still an image problem, has, after 25 years, Griffith given an alternative to the community without a connotation, but has it got a separate identity without going back to traditionalism and still being relevant to what business and the community requires? I put that very long-winded, I think you know what I mean.
I understand what you mean, yeah. Well, I think it has. I think that what Griffith offers, leaving aside the question of whether the message or the image of it is clear enough, but what it offers is, in many of its activities, different from either UQ or QUT in its emphasis. It is either by way of courses that are just not offered at the other places, although there's an increasing tendency for us all to copy each other. Even UQ's getting into business. Introduced a Bachelor of Business this year, which would have been unthinkable at UQ.
Absolutely. When I was there, but I think we are, there's some areas still where we're offering different types of courses. But even where we're offering courses with roughly the same names, we've got a different approach because of the interdisciplinarity. The problem-solving teamwork approach. So I think it does offer something different to both of the other metropolitan universities. Okay, well look, Ask Colin McAndrew whatever happened to the honorary degree for Clem Jones. I don't really care, but do you want to comment on that at all?
I'm not sure what the point of the question is.
Somebody, at some stage, I think this is Sam Rafus, I'm not too sure, maybe I shouldn't say that, but somebody did ask me to ask you, but at some stage Clem Jones was supposed to get an honorary degree here, and it was put on the back burner or something. Now, did he ever get an honorary degree to your knowledge, or did it ever come up to you now?
He's certainly been offered one. I just can't remember whether it might be this year. Well, now you raise it, just let me just check. It might be coming on stream. I'm sure that went through council. I mean, the process is that you get nominations in from around the university. It goes to the Awards for Service Committee, and then it goes up to council, and then we offer it. And occasionally we get knocked back. And some people, they like honours and so on. People don't take them. It's very rare.